Hi, so I wanted to talk about the topic one, lesson one, living things notes. So, for those of you guys who either missed a day of class or if you wanted to go back and double check that you got all the notes for lesson one, this is a good way to do it. Especially for those of you guys who are getting ready to review for the lesson one test. This is a good way to refresh some of the things that we talked about in class. So, lesson one is all about living things and the characteristics of living things. And remember, if we're talking about biology, which is the study of life, we need to learn what the basic characteristics that actually define life are, and that's what this lesson's all about. So we start off by learning about our 6 characteristics of life or of living things. So scientists have looked at a bunch of different organisms and a bunch of different things that are either on the edge of being living or things that we know to not be living, such as rocks. They've looked at these and they've said, in order to be considered a living organism, you have to have these 6 characteristics. The first one is you must be made of cells. And so in order to be made of cells, you can have either one cell, which is called a unicellular organism, or you can be multicellular, which means that you can have many cells. Some examples of those: bacteria fall into the unicellular category. There are some single-celled versions of fungi, but in general, if you have one cell, you tend to be considered a simple organism. Multicellular organisms tend to be more complex because they have different cells that are working together to perform many functions. And we'll talk about some of that levels of organization later on. The second one, all living organisms contain the chemicals for life. And there's 5 main chemicals that they contain. First one is carbohydrates. And it's important to know where some of these types of chemical compounds can be found. So carbohydrates are found in bread, grains, fruits, vegetables, or we a lot of time hear them referred to as carbs. Protein is found in meat, in cheese, beans, eggs. Protein is the second one. The third is lipids. Lipids fall into one of 2 categories: either fats, which are solid when at room temperature, and oils are liquid at room temperature. So butter is a good example of a solid lipid, and so we would call that a fat. Nucleic acids are the 4th example of a chemical for life, and nucleic acids fall into one of 2 categories mainly. There's some other ones as well, but either DNA or RNA. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, so DNA, or RNA, which stands for ribonucleic acid. Both of those have different functions that they perform in the cell, in human cells, and some organisms only have RNA or mainly use RNA. But regardless, all of these are generally considered the blueprints for life. Pretty much they're an instruction manual for how those organisms are built and what characteristics they have. Lastly, all organisms that we know of need water, or that's a characteristic that they need, is water, and in some way, shape, or form to make their cells function. The third characteristic of living things is that they need to grow and develop. So even if a single-celled organism, such as a bacteria, is going to repair organelles on the inside of its cell, and they're going to make other changes, in the same way, bigger organisms, more complex organisms, might need to make repairs or to grow or to duplicate cells in order to survive. So all of those little changes that are happening, as well as even more complex changes, like when a human baby goes from a single cell all the way up to a several trillion cell body like they are when they're an adult. Those are very complex changes, and that just shows how much organisms, living things, can grow and develop. The 4th characteristic of living things is that they respond to their environment. When you respond to your environment, that could be anything caused by a stimulus. So a stimulus is some thing that causes a response. It can take many, many, many different forms. One example is to turn off a light in a room, and then your eyes will adjust to the darkness. The second is if someone throws a frisbee at you which is the stimulus, you might respond by catching it, hopefully. The next one is reproduction, the fifth characteristic of living things. You can either take one of two, so every living thing has to make copies of itself in one way, shape, or form, or at least the goal is to try and make copies of itself. And they can either do that by making an identical copy, all right, which is what asexual reproduction does. In other words, the DNA of the parent cell is mainly reproduced identically in the offspring. Now, there's obviously plenty of exceptions to that due to something called mutation, which we'll talk about when we get to bacteria. But that's the goal of asexual reproduction is just to be relatively simple and to make a copy of the DNA so that it's identical. Sexual reproduction is a little bit different. Sexual reproduction combines the DNA from one parent with the DNA of another parent, and those two, when they come together, form a new, unique form of DNA. And it's one that hasn't been found before. All right, finally, all living things, one of the other characteristics is that they use energy. And so we know that the primary source of energy on Earth is the sun, and that once that energy reaches Earth, it gets absorbed by plants and other photosynthetic organisms, and then that energy starts to work its way up a food chain. So it goes into primary consumers, and then from there it works its way up to the top level consumers, which are the main predators. And one thing that I mentioned with this, and we talked about this a bit in class, which is the law of conservation of energy. This applies here because we know that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only change form, which is really important here because energy that we have on Earth is not just magically showing up here. It's coming primarily from the sun, and there is some energy as well that's coming from the internal core of the Earth. It's not so much physical energy that we're using other than some of the nutrients and things like that plants need in order to survive are coming from pretty much molten rock that eventually makes its way up to the surface and eventually will form soils. So that's some forms of energy that can be used, but the bulk of the energy that's used on Earth is going to be coming from the sun. Okay, so that's the first section of notes. The second section of notes for this is talking about spontaneous generation, which was this idea that they had a long time ago that living things can arise from non-living sources. All right, the first person to test this is Francesco Redi, and he was around in the 1600s. And he did, oh man, brutal mistake here. This should say M-E-A-T. I apologize for everyone who's testing my grammar here. M-E-A-T, not meat as in you're going to see a friend. So a meat and jar experiment. And in this case, he put a slab of meat into two different jars, and he covered one with a mesh surface, and the other one he left open. And what he was doing with this was trying to see, this experiment on the left here, he was trying to see, so he had one, this is a little bit of a different picture than what we drew in class, but we only drew this one on the left and the one on the right. But what he did here was he had an open container where flies were able to come in and land on the meat, and then he had a container on this side which was covered with cloth that the flies could smell the meat, but they couldn't actually get in there. And what he noticed was flies would have laid eggs on the surface of this mesh, but nothing was able to get in and actually none of the fly larvae or maggots were able to get in and actually land on the meat. And as a result, this showed that flies, in this case, did not just come from meat. They actually had to come from the other flies. So to go back a slide, one of the big things is that this disproved the idea of spontaneous generation, and it showed that life must come from other living things. However, like many scientific advances of the time, people did not necessarily accept them right away. So it took another 200 years or so for this idea to really kind of ferment. And Louis Pasteur was one of the people who came along, one of the scientists who came along afterwards, and did another experiment which helped to cement people's understanding of this concept. And a lot of these things had to do with some technological advances as well, guys, for the time. He used different special flasks that he had made, as well as chicken broth, and he performed an experiment where he boiled two different types of, he had two different flasks. He boiled both of the containers that were full of chicken broth and waited for them to cool down. And then one of these two, or both of these, were sealed off to the environment because of some of the water that had boiled off out of the chicken broth. And in order to reopen them to the environment, he broke one of the containers open, all right, which allowed some air to get inside. And the one that he broke open ended up getting some air coming in that was carrying with it bacteria or microbes, and that started to spoil, and become cloudy. Whereas the other one, which remained closed, stayed healthy. So what this showed was living things, in this case, after the boiling process had happened, there was nothing living on the inside of these. It wasn't until one opened up to the environment that living things came in from outside of the environment, outside of the container, and caused this to start to spoil. And with that, he once again showed that spontaneous generation should be disproved. Lastly, guys, we're talking about the needs of living things. So this is different than the characteristics. There's 6 characteristics of living things. The needs of living things are water, is our first one, which we are needing for daily functions of our cells. And humans can only survive with 2 to 3 days without water. And we also talked about in class how when we look for life on other planets, we're looking for water, because that's one of the initial indicators, at least from what scientists think, that life might be there. The second, food is important because all organisms need some source of energy. For an autotroph, or a self-feeder, that form of energy is going to take the form of the sun, and plants are going to absorb it. Photosynthetic bacteria and protists can also make their own food. Alternatively, if you can't make your own food, you have to get it from something else. So heterotrophs, all right, are other feeders, and they cannot make their own food. They get their energy from other sources. So this could be humans, dogs, or non-photosynthetic organisms like fungi or protists. And for a human's case, they can survive for only about 7 to 28 days without food. The last two, you have space. All organisms need some place to live, even if you're a bacteria, all the way up to a blue whale. And when they do this, they have to compete for that space a lot of times. And they compete for the resources in those spaces, whether that resource is water, food, a mate, or other things. Wherever an organism lives, we call that its habitat. So a bacteria might live on the inside of someone's intestines, at the bottom of the ocean, up in the atmosphere, or just on the surface of something's skin. Fish, on the other hand, as another example, they can survive in coral reefs in the tropics, at the deep bottom of the ocean, in the Arctic Ocean, lakes and streams, and many other places. Last but not least, all organisms need homeostasis. In other words, they need to maintain stable internal conditions. And so that could mean keeping a consistent temperature, allowing them to have enough water, keep their salt concentration consistent, their food intake consistent, and oxygen, carbon dioxide, and many other things. The only note here is that oxygen is not a need of living things. Not all living things need oxygen to survive. Some things can survive in environments where there is zero oxygen. We call it anoxic. So don't include oxygen as one of the 4 needs of living things. Every year a student gets tripped up by that concept. So even though humans need oxygen, not all life on Earth does. Those are the notes for lesson 1. And if you have any other questions on this or you want clarification on anything, just let me know.